Welcome again to another edition of Drummer Nation. This is your host, Michael Vosbein, and my co-host and partner in crimes and misdemeanors is here, Adam Nussbaum. Good day to you, sir. And a special guest today, a good friend who's done my show before, and he never says no when I ask him for a favor. Here he is back, Mike Clark. Thank you for coming, Mike.
Thanks for having me, both you cats. And hey, the old still at it here.
Still at it. Nothing stopped us yet. Mike, I was thinking of you again because I just got hip to your book, the Post Bop Drum Book. How long's that been out?
Maybe 3 years. Yeah, I think it was right before the pandemic, man, right in there.
How'd you survive the pandemic? Did you do okay with all that?
Well, I used to go to the gym and work out a lot. I was a gym rat. I never got huge, but I was really into it. And during the pandemic, the only thing I curled was a wine glass. So that's how I got through. And me and my wife and our cats, we didn't have the dog at that point, stayed in this apartment we barely left. And we got along great. And I wrote some music, what little I write, and I prepared an album that I'm getting ready to do with Patrice Rushen, and I'll tell you all that later, and Henry Franklin on bass. And
the Skipper.
Skipper, that's right. Your skiffness, And I got a Skipper T-shirt around here, so it's not this one up, but.
But did you know that 14 muscles are activated when you're opening a bottle of wine?
Well, I must be a strong dude, brother.
You can learn so much here on Drummer Nation.
I'm a Buddhist, so I did a lot of chanting and Buddhist studying. I learned to read charts a lot better. I've been a C reader since sixth grade or fifth grade. I've been in big band all my life in school, and I'm a C reader. Best.
So you worked on that during the pandemic?
I did.
I think we all did. Adam was working on some stuff. What did you do during the pandemic?
I tried to play the Wilcoxon book, something I had never done before. And, referring to C reader, it kind of made me more of an A hearer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My ears are always been much better than my eyes. I mean, that's pretty much how I learned everything was, monkey see, monkey do. And I find that if I don't think about it, I read better if I don't think that I'm a bad reader.
And always rely on your ears.
It's always a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think something,
yeah,
that's how it's going to be. But if you stay optimistic and positive, it can have definitely a good benefit.
Here.
I spent the time working on up tempos, 300 and above, and you don't get to play that often. But you don't want your ass handed to you when you have to.
This I'd like to weigh in on. First of all, Lenny White, Adam, and myself are ear drummers. I've been an ear drummer since day one. I was a Gene Krupa drummer at 7 and 8 years old. And then my father, when I was about 10, brought home an Art Blakey record. And here I am at this writing. So, but I was always an ear drummer. But my chart reading, and I did the Will Coxon book as well, Adam, or tried to, and has really improved. But so I was you guys are going to dig this. So Mike LaDon, I've been playing this gig out at Brush Culture with Mike LaDon in Teaneck, New Jersey, every Wednesday. And Mark Whitfield, and sometimes Eric Alexander plays. Different cats when Mark can't make it. But he hit me with these tempos, these 380, 400. I mean, I didn't even know those numbers until some young drummer in the audience explained to me, man, you're playing at 400. And I'm like, I am. But I mean, I don't look at music like that. But what happened was I used to do this with Jack Walrath when I was young enough to muscle it out,
Mm-hmm.
So I never had a technique for playing that fast because who the hell plays that fast? And Mike LaDon. and you can't say no. He's the band leader. So the first day I did the gig, I was okay for maybe a chorus, and then I had to use two hands to play the ride cymbal, to play the tangs to dang, because my hand cramped and froze. So then I did Tim Metz, the great drummer from Sacramento. Do you know Tim?
I don't.
This dude can play, man. And he's
How do
great.
you spell his last name?
Metz. He's
Tim Metz. Okay.
Yeah, Tim. He's a bad boy, fellas. He can play. He can play some Elvin stuff, some Max, and he's got it. He knows the whole damn thing, and he's really good. Well, I'm doing my clinic on his Zoom station, whatever you call it. He's got a bunch of kids that pay to come in. And, and at the end, one of the kids said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Well, I've just been challenged to play this up-tempo stuff that I haven't played since 1983 or something. I play a lot of guys. Nobody does that." So Tim said, "Hey, Ed Shaughnessy showed me how to do this. And I'm like, this is my clinic. I'm like, teach me this right now, because Wednesday's coming up in 2 days and LaDon ain't going to play around." So he strikes the cymbal to the right, almost like a circle. So tang, and then the ta-dang is over here. And you kind of squeeze on the last tang a little bit, if you can, at that tempo. But it's not like the old Max records where you're dribbling like it's not that. You're actually able to play tang to tang. And at first, I did it real slow, because the whole thing is being able to open the hand so it won't tighten. So I just went tang to tang, tang in a circle, and then tang to tang, tang to tang. The circle got smaller and smaller, but I'm still able to do it. And pretty soon, I get so good at it. I only practice it. I'm not a big practice drummer, so I did 10 or 15 minutes every day, but for a month, and almost every day, and. Sure. After a while, I could throw this thing at the cymbal and get all three notes. And Mike, we're playing that fast, and I'm cool now. I can do it. I'm not, and I'm relaxed. I'm not totally relaxed. But I'm relaxed. I'm not stressing and fighting like I was the first couple of weeks out there. I was like, I don't think I can do this. Plus, I have all kinds of injuries. I can't make a fist this close because of arthritis, and I got tendonitis and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter with this motion.
Mike, what you're showing is fascinating, because I'm always thinking of everything being round. That's how I'm always thinking. And this is, a perfect example of this, where you're keeping a round motion. And, I've seen the Brazilian cats do that 16th note thing where it's going like kind of like this. But, if you're thinking of, this is almost you can see my motion is almost round here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way you catch the, like skipping the rock on the water. I always kind of think of that analogy. And I think the whole thing also is, too, mentally, how you are dealing with it. It's that whole thing. If you say, "Oh my gosh, it's fast," you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're done.
And it's like, if you just think like, "Oh, it's just another tempo," and it's staying relaxed. And the opposite is true when it's super slow. When it's super slow, you really got to stay focused.
That's right.
To maintain the momentum. So it's kind of like a yin yang thing. And it's like anything. The more you do it, the less you don't want to be, like, for me, I don't want to think about anything when I'm playing.
Yeah.
I just want to pay attention. Because as soon as I start thinking, you start getting out of the now and into and this could be a bad neighborhood sometimes.
I know. Yes, sir, it can. Yes, sir. And with a guy like LaDon, he's in it to win it all the whole way. There's no BS. There's no showmanship. He's sunk, submerged, and I'm the same way. What have we got? What else do we have at this point? This is what we do. So I'm going to try to be in it the whole way. Sam Woodyard, when I was 13, he was making a circle at him like you're.
For those who don't know, he was Duke's drummer for many, many years. Duke Ellington's drummer.
Yes, and my uncles were 5 Italian prize fighters, and one was a really talented lightweight. He was really good. He had 260 fights or something, amateur and pro and all. And he was afraid of the mob, so he stayed out in Sacramento. But when they got older, they couldn't fight anymore. They all had arthritis, all 5 of them.
Mm.
And so the one took tickets at the Memorial Auditorium, so he would get me backstage, and that's how. And I could see Duke, Count Basie, Ray Charles, James Brown, Gene Krupa, Tommy Dorsey, Sonny Payne. Oh Lord! And all right, so Sam Woodyard, I'm backstage, and he's turning his arm. I mean, he's really turning it like a big circle. Now this must be 1960. I was 13 or 1959, and but the floor is moving. He's rocking the damn floor, man. Him and this bass would just, and no no monitor, nothing, just gut. And we're out there like, oh man, I mean, so I say to him, I get back there to meet him, and I said, Mr. Woodyard, when you make that circle on the cymbal, are you doing that for show? Because he was making a big one, man. And I think part of it was for show. He's doing a number on everybody. I mean, we all loved it, of course, and this is early on. And he said, no, my contention is, that was the word he used, is I'm picking the quarter note up out of the cymbal and making it dance. And we call it scooping ice cream.
Really?
That's the difference between tang and chang. He was like chang, tang, tang, chang, tang, chang, tang. And you could just play that quarter note. If you had no left hand and couldn't read a note, he'd swing that band into bad health, as we all know they used to say. I mean, this shit was, excuse me, this stuff was rock.
Sorry about that.
I've heard that. I never heard that term scooping. I've heard the term digging coal.
Yeah, that's another one.
That's another one I heard some of the cats use from back in the day, digging coal. And, the whole thing, tipping, all the different ways. I mean, the ways that you try to learn how to play the cymbal. It's different than the drum. It's got a different response. It's got a different thing. And, learning how to, be friends with it and have like a symbiotic relationship. Yeah.
Well, that rotary thing, where I was just watching back one interview we did with Billy Cobham recently. He was talking about buzz rolls and making circular motions that way. And I started trying that, because who's happy with their buzz roll, right? Nobody. Pianissimo buzz roll can work on for the rest of my life. But it made a big difference in just that circular approach. So it can work there and it can work here too.
Absolutely.
That's pretty hip.
I mean, first of all, Adam, you're a master jazz right cymbal player. And when you said that symbiotic relationship and getting to love this cymbal and have it love you back to where you're no longer, I mean, I use the BS word.
Oh yeah, you say anything you want.
We're no longer bullshitting. This, just like funk drummers know how to put that backbeat right there. You know how to play the stang, chang, to dang. If the bass player's behind, he's behind. If he's too edgy, that's a drag. But not too much bothers you once you get good at it. And I'm getting better at it. I've been doing it all my life, and I'm improving. And Shelley Mann said, and I'll close with this on this particular subject: the ride cymbal is the easiest yet the hardest thing a drummer is ever going to play in jazz music.
Oh, I didn't know that quote. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, there's that term that Red Mitchell used to say, simple is not easy.
For people who may not know tempos, when we say 300, 400, we're talking about beats per minute. And 400 beats per minute is this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's faster as shit. And it'll go on for 10 minutes, man. Ding, 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 ding. Then you got a comp and shade and solo and fours, and it's a challenge.
And choruses. And these cats take a lot of choruses. So once it starts, you ain't getting off the hook. It ain't like you can just stop it or go into halftime. you know. Yeah, and
Strap in, man.
strap in, and you're playing rhythm changes on the solo, so you got to play the shit. You got to play the bridge and all the stuff, and you don't want and at first, then soloing at this tempo. At first, they would hand you this tempo. It's like, okay, they're done, and you're on. You're like, and I would be like, and then I calmed myself down and started playing some music. And I'm getting better at this tempo, playing music and everything, and here's another cruncher. Me, I'm sort of a post bop type cat, so I haven't played the hi-hat on 2 and 4 for years. I play it on 2 and 4 a lot, but when I get ready to get rid of the hi-hat totally or to play it as another voice, I do. Unless I'm playing with a guy that goes, we're going to play like Clifford and Max, and that's what I want, and he's paying me. But if I just want a gig, I'm just going to do how I feel. Now, playing the hi-hat on 2 and 4 all the way through a 15-minute thing like this, too, I haven't done that in years. If ever, I'm not sure I ever did that, but I can do it now.
There you go. Well, there's a chapter in your book about the hi-hat as a fourth voice, I think it's
Yes.
called,
Yes.
which is very cool because, one of the reasons I've never really been interested in double bass drum is because I think I want a different instrument over there. I want a hi-hat. I don't want another bass drum. There's already one bass drum. That's enough to me.
And you got a bass player. So if there's too much bottom, you're all over his space, and they don't like that.
And the kids might have a drop D tuning on the guitar, and it's all like down there, and it gets pretty mucky,
Especially Ron Carter. He's not going to like that,
Now, I haven't talked to you about your early years because we did a show a few years back, and we covered all that, and I'll put it in on the screen and in the notes so people can link to that. You were a child, just go over briefly, you were a child prodigy. You grew up and traveled around a lot. You got a lot of cool stuff from New Orleans. Parade drumming and all. And then I'm interested in that point where it's changed to funk. You mentioned Cannonball, soul stuff, boogaloo, blues. What shifted your, because you became an exponent of the Oakland sound, which we're going to play a little of, and that's super funky, super hip, super broken up. But you were a dyed-in-the-wool jazz bebopper long before that.
I used to try to play with the Clifford Max record every day before school. I wasn't interested in. I liked to listen to Ray Charles and when Lee Morgan. I'm a Blue Note junkie, so when Lee Morgan and Horace Silver did all that, I was right there and listening. And sometimes on a gig, I played a lot of organ gigs where I'm from. That was an easy way to make a living, and I was good at it, so I got a lot of that. So they would do these boogaloo things. But here's what happened to me. I was not even thinking about any funk, but I could always, without learning how the beats went or practicing it, play James Brown stuff. Like I could hear it on the car radio, go home, get out of the car, walk in and play it. Pretty close, as it turns out. I just did what I thought was right. I wasn't trying to completely copy the guy, but okay. But I was good at it. I could just, our brains are all different, and some guys can do this and some guys can do that. Well, I could do this. And
you got the vibe.
Yeah, I could just do it, and so the jazz drummers who were not making records in that area played perfectly lousy James Brown because they'd make it sound like Horace Silver. So the James Brown cat would get mad at them. They'd be like, man, it's too loose for them. It was actually too funky for now in retrospect, but I could play that tight shit. And it just, it's the Italian side. So I guess, but I always could do it. So I started getting calls from organ people who heard me, from organ players, but people who heard me on the organ gigs. And I called to play with Joe Tex and Bobby Freeman and O.C. Smith. And I'm like, damn. And there was a trailer that we would go to that had a bunch of people typing and the business aspect of this. And this was all African-American, all of it. And they referred to me. I was only 16. They called me the Funky Monster. I didn't like it.
You didn't like that name?
No, not then. Now it's funny, but I was like, man, Well, and they would call the Funky Monster, and but because there weren't many guys around that could play these beats, I played with Sly Stone a little bit, and all these guys, and everyone was like, "Yeah," and so that's how that started. But I didn't want that to deter me from my jazz career, which I was really doing well. So I made the transition from Max Roach and Philly. I can't play like those guys, but that style it became
Oh, I
popular.
understand.
Yeah, Elvin and Tony. That's where the hi-hat fourth voice came from.
Mm-hmm.
Woody Shaw said, I don't want to hear no bebop drumming. You either learn some of Elvin and some of Tony, or you're not on this gig. So
Really?
that's when I made
So,
the switch, see. And I started
mhm.
to Elvin. I didn't understand what he was doing. And I had an older friend drummer that knew some Elvin things and he showed them to me. And the Tony things I could kind of understand because they were more 8/8 orientated.
I think about tempo has something to do with that, right? Because when we're playing jazz and swing and it's slow, real slow, it's more like dotted 8/16. When it's in the middle, it's more like
Huh.
triplets. When it gets fast enough, it's like eighth notes anyway, right?
Straightens out. And it's hard to keep the triplet at a certain point. I would say the triplet starts to disappear a little, not in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In the I mean, I can only play shake it to take it to get. It's if it gets too fast, like it's not that. It
Right.
flattens out for me.
It's almost like something spinning, you know?
Yes,
Yeah, but
yeah.
when it's ding, 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 those are the straight eighth notes, basically, right?
Well, if you get, for me, when you get fast enough, it does sort of get like da da instead of chang, it's a tang, it's a tang, it's a tang, you know. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but
Now, let me ask you when you're articulating, because you play, to me, you play jazz when you're playing funk, like that Herbie stuff was, I
yeah,
thought of it as jazz music because it was improvised and you weren't playing patterns. As great as Jabo and those guys were and Clyde, they were playing patterns for stuff. You guys were blowing most of the time, right?
even the groove was blowing. We just didn't blow up. We kept it there, but we were talking, speaking to each other.
That's
So
what I mean.
yeah,
The implication of the groove was so strong without it being necessarily stated. Because with everybody that you were, I mean, those people that we, first heard you with out in the world, like Herbie and Paul, everybody just had such a deep ingrained beat. It's like you guys could dance around it. You didn't have to state it. It was there. And then, you could do the dance because it was way in there, man. I got to drop on this, man. I remember hearing you in 73, I think it was, at the workshop in Boston. Because I was going to Emerson College. Paul's Mall was the club right next to the workshop. There were two clubs there. Like you could hear Sarah Vaughan in Paul's Mall and like hear you guys in the jazz workshop, the same complex. I remember coming in and seeing you, and you had a terrible cold. I walked up and I said, "Hey, man, you are?" And you go, "Oh, man, I feel terrible. I got this terrible cold and everything." And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'll play the gig. But I heard you cats, and it was fantastic. And to hear you cats in an intimate room like that was really fantastic. But that's the first time, man, and I experienced it firsthand. And we've spoken about it. There's never any substitute for being in the room
oh,
and feeling that thing.
especially a small room where you can
Right.
feel not a big
Yeah.
Right.
full of
Yeah.
monitors.
I mean, we're right there. It's like being in the Vanguard or, some of these joints where,
Right.
yeah, that, and
It's intimate.
I remember it, it had a deep impression on me. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, bro, because you're such. I mean, you're
Mhm.
a hero of mine. One of my
Oh,
you, Benny, and Al and Jabali and Billy Drummond. I mean, come on, man, that's the top for me. So
these are all my inspirations, people that inspire me. And I just love the community,
yeah,
because when we all get together, it's everybody's encouraging and supportive. And I keep thinking of our Blakey's line, we can make you, we can break you, But it's just great to hear because, you brought, like Michael was saying, you brought like the jazz attitude and approach to playing more backbeat, funk-oriented music. You're improvising with it. And
let's hear some of that. I mean, you got known nationally and internationally from that stuff with Herbie. Everybody still talks about Actual Proof. So let me play a little of that for it. Okay, I'm not going to let it go long so the police don't bust us on this, but I mean, I can't hear it without making a stink face. You know what I mean?
Well, that's good. That's a good sign, man. Yeah.
It's so hip and funky and happening, and that's not repetitive, right? You're blowing through that.
And when you go to the cymbal, I just played, even though I just played like you would in all the stuff I've listened to, Klug, Max, all the same guys we always talk about. I don't have fusion language. I have bebop and post bop sort of all into a blender language,
That's what's so hip about it. That's what makes it Mike Clark.
Yeah, Sonny Payne, I loved him. All those guys who, I mean, I don't think there's too many drummers I don't like. I really don't. I mean, I like good drummers, and I even like drummers that they don't have to, if they're funky or they're swinging or they play beautiful ballads I'm down. I'm down.
We all spin the web different.
Mm-hmm.
And, different things, different sounds, different phrasing, different articulations, different feels, different vocabularies.
Yeah.
I just did a little deep dive into Jeff Porcaro because we were talking to Robin Flans last week. And he mentioned if a 16th note groove, of course, he was working a pop field. He wanted all of them on the right hand. He didn't like to break it up.
Okay.
I always liked it better broken up. I mean, I guess it depends on the style you're playing, or are there any times you would choose to just play straight 16th notes on the hi-hat?
Yeah, but at one point I did, and I don't know why. When we did Palm Grease, then when I wasn't playing with Herbie and I would go back home, that style was popular, and so so if I played with some guys who were real funky, I guess I would keep it going as long as I could. I mean, I'd take a breath here or there, but as far as, leave one out or something, I wasn't trying to just keep it going to keep it going.
Right,
but,
right.
I also played with Mark Isham and Barry Finity and those guys way back, and we would break it up. And of course, that was supposed to be the modern creative thing. And the other thing was if you're in the hood, then you're going to play pretty much that style at that time period. Now I take the easy path of least resistance on everything that I do.
Let's talk about shuffles, because there's a conservative approach, the old school approach, which grooves like crazy, but you can also do more like we could call it linear, broken, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of ways to play a shuffle, right?
My shuffle beat comes from two places. When I was 5 and 6 years old, my father would take me to see Louis Prima at Lake Tahoe all the time. And we got to know Bobby Morris, the drummer.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him when I was really small showing me. I don't know whether I could do it, but I can remember him sitting at the table and showing this to me. And plus listening to those guys. And then as a teenager, or kind of an older teenager, I was playing the lounges in Tahoe, Vegas, and Reno, and I would hear Butera and those guys. And then my friend, a great drummer, Paul Ferrara, yes, sir, was, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I read that book. That's a great book.
I did too. But Paul Ferrara was the one because he was from New Orleans and he was a nasty dog when it came to a shuffle. And he was like lightning, hot nervous system, like that, bat, bash. This dude would explode. And so I learned something of those shuffles. Then I went to Texas to visit with my father, and I caught a gig at this club called the Tracer Club in Fort Worth. And I had to learn the Texas shuffles, and there's 3 or 4 of them. And I use them I do have my version of an Art Blakey shuffle for a jazz gig. I do a completely different thing for a jazz gig.
But describe those, though, because we know what you're talking about, but maybe a lot of kids watching don't.
Well, one is like this. It goes right with the guitar line, and I love this. And you could play one note or you could play both notes of the shuffle, but I even, play it with like Kenny Clark, use my thumb and let it drool. I want the shit to leak out of my mouth. And here, yeah. And here's the way it kind of sounds like this. Sha-da-da. And man, bro, I got chills on my arm just singing the damn thing. I could do that for 4 straight hours and never play a fill,
It feels so damn good.
I did that last night to LaDon, and we both had huge grins like 12-year-old kid, and he had it on, man. And okay, so that's one of the
okay.
Now it's called the backdoor shuffle, the flat tire shuffle, the this and that. But that was what
I don't know the names of all these. I never heard these terms.
I never heard those names
either. This is
either.
great.
I never heard them either.
Blues Chitlin circuit that I ended up on.
Right.
I played with Albert King and Albert Collins and Jimmy Reed and all these guys. And I was still trying to be Philly Joe Jones. I didn't know any of this stuff, but they taught me like right on the spot by sometimes threatening me like there were guns and this type of thing, man. Albert.
Where'd those good old days go?
Maybe coming back. But when Albert King paid me, the gig was supposed to pay $15, and he went, "What'd I say, $12?" And he had a 38 in one chair, and you're stepping in my office, the back of the club, and he was a monster, and I didn't argue. I went, yes.
And, sure, that'd be great.
Yes.
Hey, you know what, man? When you talk about the education through these great people, I stop sometimes and I think, man, I should have been paying them for what I learned, because it was what the money was almost secondary to the depth of the experience.
Oh my goodness. There's no way to pay my gratitude back. No way. I've made a fairly good living, and I'm not the fastest draw in town. I'm not the best damn drummer or any of that stuff. So I'm one of the lucky ones, man. But
there's a Peter Erskine story like that. He'd been on the Kenton Band for like a week, and he runs into Stan in the elevator, and Stan says something like, "Well, we never talked about money." And Peter says, "Oh yeah, what do I owe you?"
I love that.
How
much you need, or whatever he said. But
absolutely,
point taken.
Times when I did pay, trust me. The other part of the Texas Shuffle is this one where you put the beats almost uncomfortably close together, and it's like you're on a tightrope, and you've got to have a bass player that understands this. Most of those guys did. If I just do this with anybody, even a tremendously great bass player, he might think I'm full of but this was something you had to be able to do. I'll try to play it for you because it's a little weird. And sometimes there's no backbeat, shuffle with no backbeat. And sometimes you do use a backbeat. I've had some amazing nights with those guys that play that stuff. And And so that, and then another one is called the back half of the shuffle. Anybody can play this stuff, but to play, and that's you just play the last two notes, to tap boom, boom with the bass drum, to tap boom, and real sloppy and back.
Oh, I see.
Tight, to tap boom, to tap boom, to tap, and tang, chang, to tang, chang, to tang, and the hi hat like shh with the foot. Shh, shh. It's a little tricky. You just hit it with your heel. Shh, shh. Bro, I used to do that to Bill Doggett at the Showman, and we play a shuffle for 20 minutes.
So there's a million ways to play a shuffle, and they can all groove like crazy.
Oh my God. Yes, you're right. Yeah, this is just the stuff that I know,
Oh, yeah.
And then the Art Blakey one, of course, I dig in the middle of the snare, no rim shots, and try to make, and I can't sound like Art Blakey, but I have a little thing that I do that for a jazz shuffle that's different than this kind of stuff. So that's.
And then there's like the Donald Bailey, like Chicken Shack shuffle, boom, chicka, 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 chicka. Where like the right hand and the bass drum are almost together.
Yeah.
And that's a funky one too.
I don't know how to do that one, but I know exactly what you mean when he does it.
Yeah.
I've never done that. Wow. Yeah. It is nasty.
I try to play at it. I want to play it. It's hard to do sometimes.
I have to go back and listen to that because I used to see Duck play a lot,
Boop, 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 boop. Yeah. The thing is, too, what you're talking about is like what you're saying. You got to have the other cats in the rhythm section committed to what's happening. You just can't do it alone. Everybody's got to be in there. Like when you hear Louis Prima with the piano and the way the rhythm section is really a section. Or like when you hear James Brown, how the guitars, everybody's committed to a part to create that groovalation factor.
Absolutely.
And they're way in there. And
remember the movie on James Brown? It wasn't a great movie, but at some point he's stopping the guys in the band. He said, "Mr. So-and-so, what are you playing?" He says, "Trumpet." He said, "No, you're playing drums." "Mr. So-and-so, what are you playing?" He says, "Guitar." "No, you playing drums." Like everybody had to be in there.
In there, right. We're not the babysitter for everybody. I mean, I've been running a jam session down at this local joint. And, cats come in sometimes, they play great lines, but the time ain't happening. Then there's other guys, the lines are cuckoo crispy, but they got a great groove. And, some guys got a beautiful sound, but jittery time. And it's like then other guys, they got no vocabulary, but their time is way in there. So it's completely wrong, but it's better than something that's correct and not in there.
So I guess fascinating, man. You play to your strengths and you work on your weaknesses.
Hopefully.
Right? Hopefully. You recognize them, look at it straight in the eye and say, "Man, I got to work on this."
Oh, yeah.
Mike, the question I'm always curious about when I hear cats and they talk and, so you mentioned some of these different drummers. When you were in Oakland, who were some of the other cats? I mean, who were maybe some of the organ players and these guys that, helped to impact your development?
There was a guy.
I'm just curious for names,
There was a guy named Jimmy Ed that played organ, and he played mostly swinging stuff like the Jimmy Smith stuff, but he was funky on the inside, as funky as a cat could, and he was just.
What was the last name?
Jimmy Ed. And ED, Jimmy Ed. And he went to, and he could really play, bro. And it was all soul, all. I mean, but he played the Wes Montgomery, Jimmy Smith, the dynamic duo stuff. And he was into Wes even without the organ. So we played the thumb and all of those things, And he was into Mel Ryan, so he could change the settings and kind of sound like that. But he went to Vegas to do a gig and he became a dealer and made a ton of money and quit playing.
Smart guy.
Got out. Ray Torres, who passed away,
Ray Torres.
wonderful genius drummer that I would like to say trained me, and the way he did it was just by being my dear friend. That's all it really was. But I picked him clean. I didn't copy him because there was no way to copy his particular feel. And there was another drummer in Oakland named Sam Cox. Now this dude couldn't even roll. And he was a hand drummer, but when he played trap drums, he was so funky that me, Gaylord Birch, Garibaldi, nobody wanted to sit in. He was he sounded like Stax, and he had a homemade way of doing what me and Garibaldi did, so it wasn't as refined, which made it better. It was, oh man,
woo! More stink.
And just like all from the heart. There was another drummer named Augusta Collins that was bad, and he flirted, and he played with Julian Priester Papo, the trombonist. Then he flirted with the avant-garde, and we were all listening to Charles Lloyd with Jack DeJohnette. This is before Lenny went with Return to Forever or any of that, and Tony and Elvin and Jack. I mentioned Jack already. Who's the guy from Boston? Not Bobby Ward, but
Alan Dawson, Clifford Jarvis.
Jarvis, thank you. And we're checking, and Joe Chambers. We're checking these guys out. And there was another guy, Ronnie Beck, who ended up with the Tower of Power. He was great. And now Gaylord Birch was a rascal to be dealt with because he could play jazz and funk. And he had he was a performer. One that he showed off, he had built-in natural charisma. He had big, wide movements. He was fast as hell. He made up his own licks, and he was funky as a dog. And he could swing, man. And
sounds like an equivalent of Sonny Payne.
He was kind of a Sonny Payne cat. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I used to listen to Elvin. We'd smoke weed and listen to every Elvin Jones record. Well, what is he doing? How does he? And then we started to understand his humor and his funk, Elvin's funk, where he's putting it and where he's not. Oh man, we did a whole deal on that. Like that took about 3 years. I'm still doing that with everybody. And early Tony before the big drum set, of course, and Elliot Zygmunt then moved to the Bay Area, and he became popular, and he was great. And he was a combination of like everybody. He was Elvin, little Tony, little Philly, and just the whole history, And he had a nice East Coast thing. And Terry Bozzio, all right, did this. And you can ask him this. I remember when Terry was first got out of high school and jumped on the scene, and he was trying to play like Grady Tate, and he didn't know what he was doing. And I'm the first drummer he ever heard go on the hi-hat, and he said it messed him up so bad he went home for a week trying to learn it. And, I remember that I was talking about. I remember it was at a place called the Boathouse in Sausalito. Anyway. And then Terry went home and copied down everything from Tony's lifetime, learned to play it, took him about 1.5 years, and then he came back out and destroyed the Bay Area. He went with Woody. He was playing all of that stuff. And we were like, what the hell? This dude, what happened to him? How did he get like that? Eric Gravatt, who actually, my wife's sister, bless her heart, Linda Gravatt, who just passed away, a great actress in New York, was married to Eric. And Eric was in the Bay Area, and him and I would sub for each other and help each other get going. Lenny McBrown came up quite a bit from LA. Ralph Penland was around, a great drummer.
Hollywood.
Ralph. Yeah.
There was those great cats out there. There was Vince Ladiano, and I'm talking about cats that weren't like, in the studio scene as much. You know, of course, you had the cats like Shelley and Irvin, Alvin Stoller, and all those cats, and you know, but you had Lenny McBrown, and you had Eddie Marshall, you had Eddie Moe.
That's right, bro. Listen.
Yeah, there was some great cats out there. You had what, Sunship?
Sunship was a good friend of mine, and I remember Sunship when he played all that stuff. He played loud, quiet, and tasty. I remember
Woody Theus was his name for those people that didn't know. Yeah,
Vince Laudiano is my family. It's like I've known him. We're both from Sacramento. I've known, and boy, did we do a lot of stuff together, a lot of fun together, a lot of card games with Leroy Vinegar and all of these great art. Man, in the 60s, Billy Higgins,
right.
Vince Laudiano's ridiculous. I mean, he's a walking encyclopedia of bebop drumming, man.
There's so many cats that were out there. You know, Lawrence Marable, Chuck Thompson, Bruce Freeman. You know, a lot of them didn't necessarily originate from there, but they gravitated out to the left coast.
Well,
it's so fascinating to hear, the different spin. Like Oakland, that's a thing. That's a thing. New Orleans, that's a thing. DC cats got something. Boston cats got something. Of course, Memphis, whatever. Philly, there's a thing that happens, man.
Regional, right? Okay, Eddie Marshall. Just let me give you a quick thing on Eddie Marshall.
A great cat.
Eddie Marshall and Sputnik. Remember Sputnik? Dick Burke?
Dick Burke, yeah.
I never heard that handle.
I didn't either.
You know that we all called him Sputnik, bro.
Well, he was big.
Yeah.
And he could play, man.
He played, yeah.
Sputnik and Eddie Marshall. I'm glad you like that.
Sputnik.
Those two guys I heard live take the hi-hat off 2 and 4 and be like, or something, or whatever they did, right? I was like, how do they do that? It just took my breath. I had to learn this. Everything in my life stopped except that. I got to get that hi-hat off 2 and 4 and figure out how to do this, and I just I went crazy with it, it was just the hippest, I couldn't believe it. And Eddie and I became really, really good friends. So Gaylord and I used to bring his drums over and we'd set our drums up like Rich versus Roach and and it became full contact annihilation.
I got to see if I can find this record. Wait a second.
All right.
The great thing is that the drummers all love each other, man. They want to help each other and they're partners. It's like a big fraternity.
Absolutely. But Gaylord, Paul Jackson's father came over one day and said, Michael, you got to stop driving this Volkswagen and get you a Cadillac. And I'm like, Paul, driving a Cadillac for crying out loud. And this is Oakland. Come on, man. He goes like, no, you don't understand. 2 drum sets in the trunk. And I have a doctor friend that's got one with 30,000 miles on it, $1,400. Come and drive it. I went and drove it and I bought it that day. So
then you can fit drums in the trunk.
2 sets with big black trap cases, remember?
Oh, yeah.
So Gaylord comes over to try to beat me up on the drums. We do this all the time and then teach each other things,
Sure.
As we leave, I didn't tell him I had a Cadillac. We leave, he sees the Cadillac in the driveway, and just to blow his mind, I go, hold on a second. And I pretend to, I put a snare in there or something so he'd know it was mine. He's like, yo, what are you doing? I'm like, that's my car. That's not your car. I'm like, yeah, it is. Gaylord went and bought it. Within a few days, he went and bought an Oldsmobile convertible that was as long as my 70 Cad, right? So now
same chassis.
Yeah. And we both got hogs. We're out there on living off East 14th Street out on the highway, driving these hogs. See, so now Gaylord, myself, and Eddie Marshall are going to play opposite each other in a 3-band thing out in the park in San Francisco. So me and Gaylord roll up in I got my Cadillac. Oh, Paul Jackson had a Cadillac too. And Gaylord's got a Oldsmobile that must have been 10 blocks long. And Eddie Marshall's got a Volkswagen bus with hippie flowers all over. You ought to be ashamed, bro. I mean, I'm sorry. So anyway,
we were talking about these cats, and I dug up this band, Cold Blood.
Oh yeah.
With Lydia Pence and everything. And that was pre-Tower Power. And I thought for sure it was Gaylord, but there's also a drummer mentioned here named Sandy McKee.
Sandy passed, yeah.
Okay, so there was another guy, Frank Davis. So I was just trying to see, who was in there. But that was a funky band. I understand they're still out there in some incarnation working.
Yeah, she started up again from what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lord was with him, and Sandy was the original guy. And Sandy was the early 16th note guy, funk guys that, and also Gregor Rico, bless his heart. I love
Right.
And it was in the water. That's what we all did. It was just what it was. I don't even know how it got started, but if you lived there, you had to be able to do that. And I was one. David, if you could have heard Dave Garibaldi when he first started with the Tower of Power, man, it was like Joe Frazier. He became more refined as he aged, but he was like Joe Frazier at the beginning. That snare drum would knock it, chopping down trees, man.
One of my greatest thrills was I was playing the Stockholm Jazz Festival, and then on the main stage they had, this is the Jazz Festival, Mary J. Blige and Tower Power. And I was on the side of the stage when Tower was playing with Rocco and Dave. And man, I couldn't believe it. I just was in, the groove was so ridiculous. It was like, the percolation of the groovelation was in complete formation. And and Dave, he wasn't playing loud.
No, he didn't hit hard.
But it was so, him and Rocco, it was so grooving. It was like I was listening to PC and Philly or Elvin and Jimmy.
Yeah,
it had that kind of like just power with just the feel of it. It was amazing. I mean, I was jumping up and down hearing those cats.
Yeah. Man, one time Lenny and I took Buster, and man, Buster was at the table like moving. Everybody was feeling it to hear the Tower, And I went on the stage a couple of times because, I know Dave. So I mean, we go all the way back, and he doesn't play hard. I said, how do you do that? And he goes like, well, in my monitor, he goes, the band doesn't play loud. I'm very comfortable. It might sound loud out there, but it's not. He goes, I'm cool with it. He doesn't bang it out, And I really dug that. Harvey Mason like that. He's extreme. He plays light, but he knows. I have a feeling that Harvey knows in the studio where to hit a cymbal, what it's going to sound like in the booth. He's a brilliant man, Harvey Mason.
Man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah. Wow.
He did my show a few years back. He was just great and very generous with his time. Let's jump to the present day. What about you were heavily sampled, right? I mean, a lot of sample guys use your stuff.
They sure did. Let's see.
My notion of that is even if they pay, it usually goes to the intellectual property owners, not the drummer. God Make Me Funky at one time was one of the most, if not the most. It may have been the first sample ever. We're not sure, but it may have been. And also it was one of the most sampled ever. Not anymore. Mm-hmm.
That was the Headhunters Arista record, right?
Yes. And that drum loop at the beginning was on, that was NWA's first song they ever did. That was me. And I'm on so much of that stuff. I'll be in a movie and I'll hear myself. And we're on 24 million units, and it's usually just me and Bill Summers. But they never paid us a cent. None of them. Dre loves to sue people, especially musicians, because he has so much money. And no, the only guy that paid me was Prince, you know, and and also there was a few things going on in the band itself where somebody swung with the that with their head and it took a little bit of the hootie day there, if you don't understand what I mean. Hey,
So God Made Me Funky with Def Jam. Is you on that?
yeah, yes, absolutely.
Is that Rap King Cole?
You know, when I was in seventh grade band, Willie and the Hand Jive by Johnny Otis was popular on the radio. And we took a big band trip from Sacramento to Vallejo. And I made up dirty lyrics just like that, all the way from Sacramento to Vallejo. And I didn't realize the band teacher was in the back of the bus. And this trombone player said to me, Mike, you're a genius, because I barely repeated. It was all filth. And the teacher goes, nah, he ain't no genius. And whenever I hear this kind of stuff, I think of myself making up those lyrics, like shit.
We lost Mr. Mike.
Yeah, ain't nobody here but a chicken, brother.
Hey, man, is it something I said?
How?
You know, man, I remember when I went to see Weather Report in New York, and it was Gravatt and Damu Ramal.
Oh,
it
boy.
was Newport in New York. It was still Miroslav. And then the next year, they were playing at Avery Fisher, I think, instead of Carnegie.
Right.
And I remember getting there, and there's a big drum set on the stage. And I'm thinking, that's not Eric Gravatt's kit, because I got my Gretsch kit after I saw Eric Gravatt with that walnut Gretsch kit with the Rogers hardware. It was a big drum set, and it was Greg Errico.
Oh, he did that. You're right.
And he was doing the gig. And then, not long after that, Miroslav was gone.
Yeah.
Because the whole vibe of the music was shifting.
Yeah.
And, Miroslav, as great as he is, he don't want to be a bass player.
Still.
He wants to do something else. And God bless him, because he's great at it.
Yeah.
But the tone of the music was shifting. Yeah. And I remember it was like, wow. And, just the way the music evolved and shifted over time, with Alfonso. And then I know they went through a lot of drummers for a while, because Joe could be pretty brutal with the drummers.
Oh, yeah. I knew Joe a little bit, he was going to hire me one time, but it never came to pass. But I used to talk to him a lot, and we did a whole lot opposite with those guys. So I got to know.
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, for a year practically. And then Peter he came later. We did a few shows when Peter was there, but not many,
Right.
But the earlier guys, Muzan, a couple of guys at Chester Thompson.
Right.
Yeah, and then I forget.
Alex was playing drums for a while. Then they had some.
Yeah.
Skip Haddon was on one of the records. There was a. Yeah. I mean, I also saw them with Omar. With Peter. Yeah, it was fascinating. Joe was a taskmaster, that's for sure.
Well, I think he lit into Peter. You know what I mean?
I saw him light into Omar.
Right. Wow.
I mean, he'd just kind of look at you. You'd be playing. I saw Omar one night. I couldn't believe it. He's playing his ass off.
Yes.
And I'm standing this was in Perugia. So I'm kind of standing behind where Omar is. And I'm looking at Joe. And Omar's playing his ass off. And Joe's just looking at him like,
oh, boy.
So is that all you got? And Omar, he gets off the stage. I say, man, you sound great. He goes, I can't take it. He's like vibing me so heavy. Yeah, it was crazy, man.
All right, gents, I think we have to wrap it up, but we'll go all day with these stories. Mike Clark, I can't thank you enough with some very cool insight into a stellar career, and all those cats you mentioned and the styles and the scenes are just priceless stuff. That's why we do these shows. So we have this on record. And
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say what an inspiration you are and how much I've admired you and your career, and especially the fact that you swing so hard and you funky as hell. And there aren't many guys that do both.
My
I'm
goodness.
better for
What
knowing
it,
both of you, and I appreciate you both.